Sandeep Chachra, one of the lessons that this incident has led us to learn is the fact that you do not tamper with nature. And nature has been giving these hints to us time and again that we need to have proper environmental clearances, that the Himalayan range is too vulnerable. You do not tamper with it in the name of development. But here's the point. If not development, then how do we progress forward? How do we move forward if we don't construct roads and tunnels and highways?
Very, first of all, good evening and thank you for having me here. Today, our hopes and prayers have turned to joy. So, I firstly take a minute to applaud and salute the spirit individually and collectively of all the workers who were trapped inside. But not just them. The workers who went inside, you were talking of rat hole miners, but others who were with torches, actually clearing the iron girders at great risk. And you have heard their stories. Salute to their spirit, salute to their courage. So I want to say that to the families who were giving hope, but to all the agencies, which you have named a few, the India, both central and state, the NDRFs and the SDRFs, the Indian Army, Air Force, the Madras Sappers, and so many other agencies which collaborated under immense pressure, criticism, and media spotlight. You see, it's working under immense pressure to make this happen. So I just want to overwhelmingly and unambiguously salute that work that has been done to get the workers out. So salute to all. And my joy I share here with everybody concerned. Now that you talked about lessons, I think there are two very strong lessons which are coming out. The first of those lessons is with reference to the nature of development in the precarious ecologies. Now, here we are talking of Himalayas, and you were talking about balances. But Himalayas are extremely young mountain chain, and they're evolving that, sort of seismic areas just near the tunnels which were being dug is the main central thrust, the tectonic plates, which are going to, they're prone to all kind of very high seismic activities. So in these critical ecologies, the idea of development itself, which you were talking to, Shreyaji, needs to be sort of rethought and reimagined. So what is the kind of development Himalayas can sustain? Comes the question of the carrying capacity, comes the question of what kind of, not just people, Himalayas can sustain and so on and so forth, but the kind of grey infrastructure, the kind of construction, the kind of roadways, the kind of broadening of roads, 45-degree slopes, which have only been creating landslides, collapses, denudation of forest areas. So I think this needs to be recalibrated, and we need to be planning with nature and with the Himalayan nature in particular, which with climate change has become even more critical. So I think that's one arena which is needed, and that's the turning point Himalayas are sort of telling us. They've been telling us long, but in this year itself, in 2023, if you take the sinking of Joshimath, the kind of landslides we saw a few months ago in Himachal, but also the glacial outbursts in Sikkim. So these are very loud, clear, tall order messages that nature is giving us in our effort to tame the Himalayas. So yes, people need to travel safe, things have to move, but you can't have the same model of development that we have in other parts of the world or in our plains replicated into such critical ecologies, and very critical ecologies, which are Himalayas. So I think that needs reimagination. And central should be, how do we plan, keep in mind the Himalayan nature. So I think these are lessons that one of the tall lessons or the turning points this whole sort of incident, and not just this, is talking to, and I think it's a loud message. The second is the message with reference to how do we treat our informal workers. And I think these are also need strong people-oriented, national future-oriented. They are the makers of our country. So that lesson is with reference to, you see, most of the workers there are informal workers, migrant informal workers. And if we sort of, although National Highways Authority has asked for a safety audit of all the tunnels, the 29 under construction tunnels, and it's great that that's happening. But end of the day, in this particular instance, as you know, there was no escape routes available. These are lessons. We all know there are protocols there which were not followed. When private companies are involved, you need to make sure that they don't cut corners at the cost of workers to make more profit. So I think lessons were completely ignored. I want to take you back to a memory of Atal Tunnel, which was constructed a few years ago in Kullu and the Lahore Spiti areas. Now, there, the company involved was following, and I'm not trying to talk about a particular company, but those protocols, safety protocol, escape protocols were all followed. So you did not see such kind of instances. This was also in the Himalayas. So that, I think, has been given a short shift in this instance and several other instances in the past as well. That safety record,
You know what's
caring for
extremely
our informal
bizarre,
workers.
and I
Yeah,
can't understand, is the fact, Sandeep, that
yeah.
every time when such incidents happen, why are we not learning our lessons? It's not as if the people who are involved, the authorities, the agencies, the construction companies, that they don't realize what they're tampering with, that they are dealing with young mountains, they are dealing with vulnerable areas. And as you said, now, the threat is more because of global warming, because of climate change. How are these things not considered? How is a proper geological survey not undertaken? How are proper environmental clearances not given? Is it just our greed that is defeating everything else?
Partly yes. If you look globally, if you look nationally, I think when you sort of give out development in the hands of private corporations, this kind of greed comes into play. In public hands, you need much better regulation of these private companies which are doing it, and this cuts across. I am not talking to a particular state here. So partly yes, partly you do have protocols. It's not as if the MOUs with the companies will not have protocols. Partly it's the question of how do you hold such actors accountable. That track record of sort of liability, accountability, of actually if you look at the track record, that's extremely poor. So at the implementation level, all of these kind of things are happening. So you kind of you make merry the buck and go home, hoping that nothing adverse happens. But long-term impacts are there. So I think partly it's also the question of how do we do accountability. Business and human rights is a growing arena which needs to be further sort of implemented. We have some broad protocols, we have some international guidelines, we have these national voluntary guidelines. But I think that's an arena where you need to make strict regulations and strict oversight implementation possible of anybody who's involved in
Okay.
this kind of public activities which involve informal workers, which involve critical ecologies, construction in these spaces. So I think that's another arena, Shreyaji, that needs very strong public oversight, transparency, and certainly enforcement. And certainly the question of holding the guilty accountable. There is a criminal liability involved. Had the workers, I really, sort of praying, and this happened, those prayers were answered, all that. But had the workers had some fatalities, injured, who would have been accountable? How many people would have been put into that criminal accountability? That wouldn't have happened. I mean, that track record, that data is available of workers' accidents, and this is not just
I think
tunneling one is speaking
that
of.
needs to
This
happen
is
even now.